This season, Thatcher Demko has been standing on his head, while the Vancouver Canucks are nowhere to be found. And you can only imagine this can be extremely frustrating for a goalie, as you're constantly bailing your team out while they are constantly breaking down in front of you. And well, sometimes this frustration boils over, because during an AHL game in 2014, David Leggio was tired of being lit up. And as the opponents came down on a 2-on-0, Leggio did this.
And he totally upended the net off its moorings to prevent the 2-on-0, and they will congregate. That should be a delay of game penalty. He did not want to face the 2-0. And what was the tough break?
Yep. Instead of facing a 2-on-0, my man thought of a loophole, where he would instead just dislodge the net and toss it to the side. Because here's the thing, the rulebook at the time did state if you dislodge the net, the other team gets a penalty shot. However, a goalie would much rather face a penalty shot than a 2-on-0, as David Leggio would back up this logic as he would save the penalty shot.
Tyrell dangles, shoots, save made by Leggio!
In the AHL, the NHL, after this huge loophole was exposed, would instantly have to ban this move, as the new rule also includes a penalty shot, but that goalie will also be immediately ejected from the game. But what is even more absurd is the fact that my guy, David Leggio, would take his talents to Germany, where he would do it again. He did the thing, because as the other team was on a breakaway, Leggio would turn around and dislodge the net again. However, the DEL would take this loophole a bit more seriously, as they would rule that if a goalie purposely dislodges their net, the other team will be awarded a goal. Incredible! David Leggio, with one move, forced 3 of the top leagues in the world to have to create and adapt the Leggio rule. I've actually been trying to condition Bud to be in videos with corn pops. I've always found it fascinating that certain players have the balls to do stuff like this in the middle of a game. It's honestly hilarious. But with that, in today's video, we're going to go over NHL moves that got banned. Kind of similar to my rule change videos, so go check them out if you haven't seen them yet. And make sure to press subscribe for your weekly dose of hockey content. Somehow, we're on the road to 70K, which is crazy. Thanks for the ongoing support. Means the world. Back in the day, the agitator role was present on most, if not all, NHL teams. A role dedicated to playing like a goon, getting under the skin of the opponents while playing in the dirty areas. And when a player like this exists, one that is constantly crossing the line, there is bound to be some absolutely absurd incidents. Some of which led to the NHL cracking down and having to ban certain moves or tactics these players used to throw the other team's stars off their game. And what has to be the most notorious example is Sean Avery. Because whether it was being banned from the Dallas Stars organization for making crude comments about his ex and Dion Phaneuf's girlfriend, wearing sunglasses in his headshots, being voted the most hated man in the NHL, while at the same time, and get this, being voted one of the most sexiest men in the world by People's Magazine, Sean Avery was impeccable at getting under the skin of his opponents. Specifically, Martin Brodeur, who, keep in mind, was already considered one of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history, as he had, count it, 4 Vezinas, a Calder, 5 William M. Jennings trophies, and 3 Stanley Cups. Brodeur was already a legend who was good at brushing off annoying opponents. However, a normal opponent is not Sean Avery. This dude is in his own class, because after getting to the Big Apple, Avery and Brodeur would match up a lot, slowly but surely building up a mountain of animosity. And during a game back in 2007, Avery would dance his way to the net and drive straight into Brodeur. He would knock off his helmet, Brodeur would chop him back, and then do this flop, adding gasoline to the fire. And ladies and gentlemen, there was no going back. Sean Avery was routinely bringing up Martin Brodeur's affair scandal, which is the reason why Brodeur kept blowing a fuse. It was Avery's trick to rattle him. However, eventually that trick stopped working, and Avery needed a new move. And in a storybook fashion, the Devils and Rangers would meet up with each other in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And with the need to develop a new move to aggravate Brodeur, Avery would do this.
Tactics, call it antics, call it effective in the end. This is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this.
Nowhere in the rulebook does it state that you are not allowed to frantically wave your stick in front of a goalie's face to distract them, and so he was able to do this several times in a game. Not to mention he would score on this play.
Score! The guy you talked about, Sean Avery!
And this act was so absurd, it basically broke the rulebook. And the NHL would have to instantly take action by banning this move, coining the term the Avery rule. But somehow, Sean Avery didn't even come close to the legacy of the Rat, Brad Marchand. Because here's the difference. Not only did Marchand stoop incredibly low to agitate his opponents, but my man is also a stud. Because without the stoppage, suspensions, and injuries, Marchand could have had 100 points every season the past 5 years, which is just insane to think about. It goes to show how great Marchand is being at a Rat, because my dude is putting up Hall of Fame numbers, but people just think of him as a Rat. And during the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs, Brad Marchand would do this.
His usual antics. Oh, it is a night of spite here in Boston.
Yep. Brad Marchand would lick another man during the Stanley Cup playoffs. Why? Why? Because here's the thing. This wasn't even the first time licking another player. No, in round 1 of these same playoffs, Brad Marchand would lick Leo Komarov, meaning he is a licking offender at this point, as Brad Marchand was a 100-point player who stooped to the level where his agitator go-to move was licking. However, no rule even existed to penalize Marchand, let alone suspend a player for licking. Now, many people made the argument that this is the same as spitting, which I can agree with. You're literally licking someone with your saliva, but the NHL didn't think so. Thus, they would have to modify Rule 75 to include such a devious act, meaning if Marchand does this again, he will be suspended. On a side note, I kind of hope we see it. But one thing I didn't mention during this whole situation was the fact that Marchand's teammates were getting very unhappy with his actions, which is also why I think Brad Marchand hasn't been suspended since he licked Ryan Callahan. In the current day, if your team takes a minor penalty for, let's just say, tripping, your team goes on a 2-minute power play, and if you score, the game goes back to 5-on-5. If it's a major penalty and you score on the PP, your team remains on the PP. And back in the day, the Montreal Canadiens strategized one of the most dominant power play units in NHL history, led by Jean Beliveau and Maurice Richard, the same Maurice Richard that the Rocket Richard Trophy is named after, and it was literally not fair for the opposition. It was like a bunch of grown men playing against children. And back in the day, if you took a penalty, regardless of whether or not the opposition scored, you stayed in the box the entire time. And Jean Beliveau would set a record as he would score a hat trick in 44 seconds. 44 seconds with the exact same move on a dominant power play strategy. Because of Beliveau and the Canadiens' dominance, the NHL would have to create a brand new rule, stating if the opposition takes a minor penalty and you score, the game goes back to 5-on-5. But it literally did not matter for the Canadiens, as they would go on to winning 5 Stanley Cups in a row. Over the course of the NHL timeline, there's been many fighting moves that have been altered or just straight up banned. But what is easily my favorite banned move of all time is the Rob Ray rule. As this rule isn't as straightforward, it has layers, because back in the day, NHL fighters used to have an array of strategies. As they were not there to score, play make, penalty kill, most enforcers were there for one reason and one reason only: fisticuffs. And a very popular strategy back in the day was to try to jersey the opposing player, as their goal was basically to grab the opponent's jersey and tuck it over their head or any other body part you could get a hold of, because doing this means the opposition was pretty much blind and immobilized, and so you had free reign to land a fury of haymakers. And so players like Rob Ray had a different strategy. Instead of trying to defend being jerseyed, they would just straight up take their jerseys off, and a lot of the time even their equipment. But you might think, wait, how could taking off protective equipment help? It gave them more mobility and eliminated the chances of them getting jerseyed, which was worth having less protection. And Rob Ray, alongside of his teammates Brad May, used this strategy all the time, as my man Rob Ray was also rumored, and get this, to straight up apply lube or Vaseline to his entire upper body, so that the opposition couldn't grab a hold of him, like some type of cursed, greased up deaf guy. And Rob Ray's tactics were getting so absurd, the NHL would have to ban the act of players removing their jerseys, while also implementing the jersey tie-down strap, which basically hooks your jersey into your pants. But it took the NHL having to see a grown-ass man putting lube all over their body to finally create a rule where players couldn't take off their jerseys. Hilarious.